Hello, my name is Tom Fras and this is my Unit 5 work reel. Our starting point for our group was to look into our composer, Deborah Pritchard, and what we found was that she has made paintings of her own music, especially the music that we were going to be using in our piece, Inside Colour. This here in front is one of her compositions written up. What you see here, as well as with some of her other work, is that she likes to depict music using these very bold colours and strong shapes. We later found out by talking to her that a lot of this is based from her own experience with synesthesia, the fact that she can see the colours in music. And in fact, after talking to her, we found out that her inspiration for her piece was in fact this footage from the Northern Lights. We use this as a springboard for our own designs. For where to head forwards, we in particular chose to look into the theme of water and the mysticism around it. Here we see a first sketch of one of the initial ideas I had for the costume that we could use, and here's a more detailed version, drawing references to Deborah Pritchard's work herself. With water as our main theme, we decided to do some experiments with light and the way that it interacts with water. We booked the black lab and we got some light emitters and shone them through bottles of water and saw the way that the lighting reacted. This would be later on become very good reference for me. And what I ended up doing was I have some footage coming up of me holding a lighting emitter, which will then go on to become one of the first VFX shots. This was to practice with the particle system that Blender has at hand. So what Blender has is a few preset effects, and one of them is fire. So I tried to work with that, and as you can see here, it goes very, very, very slowly, and that was simply not plausible to do on a big scale with multiple different shoots and multiple different scenes. So in the end, I decided to completely ditch that and go for a more of a traditional approach, and actually more of a creative approach, which is to incorporate some of Deborah's swirls into the design and make it emit that instead. And that's the shot that comes up next. The next VFX shot that I did was making myself look like I was underwater while above ground. This is something that I really needed to get right in order to recreate again. So I went over it again and added some color grading to make it look more underwater. And then from there, I tried to find a system which was easy to replicate and would work consistently well. So here is the first time I'm playing around really with the particle system as freely as I am, unlike the one before. And what else I'm doing here is I'm using a principled volume effect and adding a three-dimensional noise texture to that, and with a slight time offset to give it this slight waving look as if you're underwater. And then with all that in place, if I turned on cycles as I did now, it looks slightly better, and you can see some of the particle effects up in the air right in front of the character. I've later on gone over this process and perfected it much more than just this shot. And as you can see at the end, the particles hardly come up at all. You can just about see a few if you wince your eyes towards the end. Another shot I needed to perfect was that of cloth moving through water. So again, we got some reference footage of cloth going through water here, as done by a GoPro in a bathtub. And then later on, I went into the Blender file with a flat surface, as you can see here, and I've added an anchor point at the front of it and added in all the figures and numbers into the surface texture to make it behave like water. And one of the things I learned from this has been very useful for later on is the different weights that I need to add to different objects. And I found that for cloth it is best to have 1 Newton of gravity that just about pulls it down. When it comes to particle effects, you want to have them at -9, which is the opposite of gravity. And here is the final thing. With all the test footage out the way, it was time to start working on some of the real footage that would end up making into the film. This was the first VFX shot that I did for the film, and in this scene, I'm meant to make Grace look like she's underwater. So what I learned from my last time is that I've learned to put in the film file as a three-dimensional object into the space, and that way you can stretch the box out like I've done here and have the film itself light up the scene. That way as well you can have glass surfaces that will show the reflection of the image behind the glass refracted through it. And as you can see here, I've added a light depth of field effect to it, just to add that motion, and added in some camera motion to a usually static shot, and the final result is like this. I had to do the same with this shot. However, this shot I decided to play around with it and decided to add some distortion effects like that to just give a sense that you're underwater and there's something mythical happening. For the next VFX shot, I needed to make water look like it was pouring out from that glass, and this might have been by far the hardest shot I've done so far. So again, I've added in the image file as a three-dimensional object in the space, and this time I'm recreating the set digitally. So I've recreated the table, I've recreated the glass, and I've put them both as invisible, and put a water particle emission at the top, and made them collide with these invisible objects so that it should match up one for one with the film. This, however, did come with problems, as you can see in the next video. When the water comes over the table, it goes in front of the table where it's not meant to happen, and there's a little black patches from underneath when it's meant to be white. And this is something I ended up fixing next time round by projecting the image onto the three-dimensional space from the perspective of the camera, so that way all of the lighting matches up one for one. The next VFX shot that I made was something that we as a group decided fairly late on in the process. It was only after really looking over the edits that we wanted to find some continuity between the animation and the film. So I was tasked with recreating this particular shot digitally and making Grace look as if she was a statue, with the water emissions coming out of the eyes. And in this shot I've got the green, red and the blue all together to add this continuity between them. The statue head ended up being a culmination of pretty much all of the things that I'd learned through animation. It ended up using my skill as a sculptor to make the face, and then more of the technical skills to make the water emissions of the tears and to make the subsurface scatter to make it look like just slightly transparent stone. And it was very fun to do. And our last shot was the credits and the title. So this first image is done using the Eevee engine, and later I used the Cycles engine, which just does ray tracing live. Same here. And we decided that for this it was nice to actually bring back a reference to Deborah Pritchard and have some of her swirls in there as well in this colour scheme. And actually here what I played around with is that I've made the particles this time turn purple the older they get, and then green the younger they are. And this is all of my animation. Thank you very much for watching.